want to ask a question?
Well, I think it was a letter to the editor of the Calgary Herald that said it best when they announced they were going from 83 to 87. They said, I knew I needed more teachers, and we needed more nurses, and we needed more doctors, but I didn't think we needed more politicians. That's a little tricky about reducing the number of MLAs is that what it would do is it would give more seats to the urban versus the rural. So we have to be aware that when that happens, the rural folk are going to feel like they get less representation. And I think that this is a bit of a problem because when we travel all over the province, we do hear that there are these divisions. I think the Stelmach government is responsible for many of them. This Calgary versus Edmonton and rural versus urban. So we have to be careful that we don't do anything that's going to increase that level of division. I wonder, though, if there's another way to protect regional interests. I wonder if we could do as Jeff and Mark say, go to a 56 MLA legislature. Maybe we need a Senate to represent regional interests. Maybe we need to have an Alberta Senate to be able to make sure that we have some kind of check and balance and we do have those regional interests represented. I'm not sure what the answer is entirely, but what I do know is that the people in the rural areas are feeling like they're spending a lot of time being the productive part of the Alberta economy, sending a lot of money to Edmonton, and they don't feel like they have a whole lot of political power. It's almost the same problem that we feel we have in Alberta, where we're sending a heck of a lot of money to Ottawa and we don't feel we have the political power. I don't know what the answer is, but it seems to me that there may be some trickiness in trying to reduce the number of MLAs.
What is the candidate's position on refundable checkoffs in the beef industry?
Okay, I have toured all over Alberta and this has been a major issue rurally. I grew up in Claresholm, and they've got, on one side is wheat and on the other side is beef. And one of the things is this. Bottom line, it should have been the beef producers that made the decision. And that is once more, on this issue, it was an Ed Stelmach government, top-down, not consulting, saying we're going to do it this way. And this is why we can win as the Wildrose Alliance Party, because I don't care if you're oil and gas, I don't care if you're health care, I don't care if you are, well, I do care if you're all these things, but no matter what you are, if you're farming, Ed Stelmach has done a top-down decision against you specifically, property rights, royalties, checkoffs, and we need to make sure the people involved get consulted, and every time possible that they be the ones that make the decision. Hence, our democratic reforms, look at the Reform Party policy and look at my policy, it's the same. Thank you.
I think we have to build on Mark's point, I think we have to go back and look at why it is the Alberta beef producers lost their funding. And the reason why they lost their funding, if you look at the Western Producer magazine who wrote this up, is because they challenged the provincial government on premise ID and traceability. It's a new program that's come in place, creating a huge amount of additional red tape and headaches for our livestock producers. In fact, one of the people who I spoke with at one of the events I went to said that now Alberta beef producers spend $80 more per head of cattle just based on the additional regulatory burden that we have in Canada. When our dollar was lower, maybe they could have handled that differential, but now that our dollar is almost on par with the US, we absolutely cannot be continuing to overburden our producers with that additional cost. Now the point is, they challenged the government on this additional regulation, and as retaliation, they pulled their funding unilaterally without having gone through the democratic process. That to me is a very scary government. A very scary government that will not tolerate dissent, and we see it time and time and time again. I think what I would prefer to have seen is a directional checkoff. Because part of the issue, and I've heard from Western stock growers and other cow-calf operators over the years, that they worried that there wasn't a mechanism to be able to hold the Alberta beef producers to account. And so if they had a way of having a mandatory checkoff, but they could send it to whichever organization they agreed with the most, maybe you had 5 or 6 or even less livestock industries or industry groups that would be able to qualify for that funding. That might have been a better way of handling it as an interim step, but certainly the retaliation is the part of that decision that frightens me the most.
Checkoffs for cows, that has something to do with agriculture, doesn't it? Yeah. I
I just wanted to open with that to tell you that I don't even know what checkoffs for cattle is. And there's a lot about this that there's issues like this that come along that I can't stay on top of. I'm a working man. I'm a small businessman. I work 12, 14 hours a day to keep the wolf away from the door and pay the bills. And I'm a guy who has to continue to work during the campaign to continue to pay those bills that somehow don't stop coming in. But no, my understanding of agriculture, and I'm a little bit familiar with it, but my understanding is that farmers are paying taxes on inputs before they make their first nickel, which is highly unfair. And like every other small businessman in the province, they're being regulated to death. And these things have to be addressed.
With Danielle, recently a super board executive got a $1.2 million severance package. Yeah. What would you as Candace do to deal with some of these sweetheart packages in the government?
Well, I think it's a great question, because that really is what we need to tackle, is how do some of these contracts get signed in the first place? How is it that we manage to have so many people at senior executive positions who have these sweetheart pay packages and the bonus packages? And the last time I looked at healthcare, we sure weren't getting results that were worthy of bonuses, nor were we getting... is lead by example. I mean, part of what our party wants to do, we have a policy in place that the leader can only be in for 8 years. And the reason we have a policy like that is because we want to attract people into the public service for whom it's going to actually be a public service. We don't want people for whom this is going to be the best job they ever had. We want people who will come in, make some changes, serve a term or two, and get out. And I think if we get people elected like that, we're going to be able to attract people in the senior levels of the civil service who have a similar attitude. You shouldn't be thinking that you're going to go in to manage a department in a public service and make the same amount that you're going to in the private sector. When I was at the Canadian Federation of Independent Business, we did a look at the kind of jobs that were available in the public sector and the private sector and what the difference in pay was for those exact same jobs. And when we looked at it, not only were public servants getting paid higher wages, they were also getting richer benefits packages, they also had far richer pension packages, they also had a shorter work week, and they had 100% job security. Now, I'm not afraid of paying public servants well, but they can't have it all. If they want to have a higher pay, they've got to take a lower pension. If they want to have a better pension, they've got to take a lower pay. And we've got to make sure that when we're negotiating with our unions, that we don't just continue to throw money at the problem. We know in the private sector, we're seeing a lot of cutbacks, we're seeing a lot of decreases in pay to avoid layoffs, and I think we've got to have the same discipline in the public sector.
Yeah, I don't know who signed these contracts, but I'd like to get one. No, the government's obviously being far too generous with far too many civil servants and bureaucrats. And the bottom line is we just have far too many of them. Not only are the contracts too lucrative, but we just have far too many bureaucrats and far too many departments basically pushing pencils, creating regulations which make other people's lives more onerous. And we could do well with a lot less of them. And of course, they don't have to be compensated. When we let go of them, they don't have to be compensated to the degree that they have been. We do have to honor existing contracts, but we need to be a little bit wiser in writing up the new ones.